rebuilding bridges. By the 3-month mark, Natalie realized waiting for Lucas to remember was destroying them both. If memories returned, wonderful, but she couldn't put life on hold indefinitely. When Lucas mentioned needing a new headquarters for his company, Natalie saw an opportunity. "I could design it," she suggested over dinner. "We worked well together professionally before. Maybe we could try again." Lucas seemed intrigued. "Your portfolio is impressive. I'd like to see what you envision." They began meeting regularly, first in her studio, later at construction sites and material showrooms. Professional conversations gradually gave way to personal ones. Not memories, but new connections. "You understand exactly what I need before I can articulate it," Lucas remarked one evening as they reviewed plans. Natalie smiled. "I always have." Though Lucas didn't remember their history, he found himself drawn to her precision, her creativity, her laugh. It was new to him, but somehow familiar, like returning to a place you visited only in dreams. "Tell me something about us," Lucas asked one night as they worked late. "Something happy." Natalie described their first vacation, a disaster of missed flights and lost luggage that became one of their favorite stories. Lucas didn't remember, but for the first time, he wished he could. The journal. The Hawthorne Technologies headquarters was nearing completion when Lucas discovered the leather journal while organizing his home office. Inside, his own handwriting chronicled their relationship from first meeting to marriage proposal. March 15th, met N at the Johansson Gallery opening. She challenged everything I said about modern art, then proved me wrong with such brilliant precision that I couldn't even be annoyed. Must find excuse to see her again. April 30, dinner at Nozawa. N knew exactly what I was trying to express with the communication app when I couldn't find the words. It's terrifying how completely she sees me. December 24th, bought the ring today. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Lucas sat reading until dawn, consumed by words written by a version of himself he couldn't remember being. The intimacy of the thoughts, his thoughts, about a woman who now felt like both a stranger and something more unsettled him deeply. Meanwhile, Natalie had begun accepting that the Lucas she married might never return. Yet working alongside this new version, she discovered layers to him she'd forgotten or never noticed. His unexpected gentleness with the construction workers, his quiet determination when solving problems. Perhaps, she thought, they could build something new from the fragments that remained. The memory bridge. The grand opening celebration for Hawthorne Technologies' new headquarters was a triumph. Journalists praised the innovative design that seamlessly merged functionality with beauty. "Dance with me?" Natalie asked as the band began playing La Vie en Rose, once their song. Lucas hesitated, then took her hand. As they moved across the floor, something about the music, the lights reflecting in her eyes and the feel of her hand against his triggered something deep within him. "I know this song," he whispered, his voice strained. "It's our song," Natalie confirmed, hardly daring to hope. "I don't remember the memory," Lucas said carefully, "but I feel something, like an echo." His hand tightened on hers, and in that moment, though he couldn't recall their first kiss or their wedding day, he understood why he had chosen her. It wasn't complete recovery, but something more profound. Emotional memory transcending cognitive loss. 2 months later, they stood in their garden at sunset surrounded by a small circle of friends. "I may not remember our first vows," Lucas said, holding Natalie's hands in his, "but I choose to make new ones today. Not because of a past I can't recall, but because of a present and future I want with every fiber of my being." Natalie squeezed his hands, for better, for worse, in memory and in its absence. As they sealed their renewed commitment with a kiss, Lucas felt another fragment click into place. Not a memory of events, but a certainty of feeling. It wasn't remembering so much as recognizing a truth his body had never forgotten, even when his mind had lost its way. Some bonds they both discovered run deeper than memory. Some connections once forged leave imprints that neither time nor trauma can fully erase. The accident. The September morning arrived with golden light streaming through the tall windows of their Victorian home in San Francisco's Pacific Heights. Natalie Bennett hummed softly as she moved around the kitchen, preparing breakfast while Lucas Hawthorne stood behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist. They swayed gently to the music playing from the speakers, a playlist they had built together over 6 years of marriage. "We should postpone your meeting and stay in bed all day," Lucas murmured against her hair, his voice warm with affection. "The company can survive without its CEO for 24 hours. Natalie laughed, turning in his arms to face him. "You know you can't. The investors are flying in specifically to meet with you. Besides, I have the Anderson project presentation this afternoon, and we're finalizing the Japan trip tonight." Lucas smiled, that soft expression that had first captured her heart when they met at a gallery opening years ago. Back then, he was just launching his tech startup, and she was establishing her interior design firm. Both of them were dreamers with ambition and vision. "Fine," he conceded, kissing her forehead. "But this weekend is just us. No phones, no work talk, just finalizing our anniversary plans. 6 years deserves proper celebration." "Deal," she agreed, pressing her lips to his. 2 hours later, Natalie stood in the emergency room of San Francisco General Hospital, her entire world crumbling around her. The paramedic's words echoed in her mind like a cruel loop. "Your husband's car was struck by a delivery truck that ran a red light. He sustained severe head trauma. We brought him straight here." She had been at her studio, reviewing fabric swatches and furniture layouts, completely unaware that across the city, Lucas was fighting for his life. The drive to the hospital felt both endless and too short. Her hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel, tears blurring her vision as she whispered prayers to anyone who might listen. The intensive care unit became her second home. Days melted into nights and nights stretched into weeks. Natalie refused to leave Lucas's side, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, eating whatever her best friend Tessa brought her, speaking to Lucas constantly even though he couldn't respond. She told him about her day, about the projects at her design firm, about the Japanese garden she planned to create when he came home. She read him his favorite books, played his favorite music, and held his hand until her fingers went numb. "The doctors say talking to him helps," Tessa said one evening, sitting beside Natalie in the dim hospital room. "But Nat, you need to take care of yourself too. You haven't been home in over 2 weeks. Natalie shook her head, her eyes never leaving Lucas's face. "What if he wakes up and I'm not here? What if he needs me and I'm gone?" Tessa sighed, squeezing her friend's shoulder. "He knows you're here. He can feel it." Dr. William Evans, the neurologist assigned to Lucas's case, was a pragmatic man with kind eyes who always spoke to Natalie with careful honesty. On the 32nd day, he pulled her aside after his morning rounds. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I need to prepare you for something," he began carefully. When patients experience this level of head trauma, sometimes there are complications beyond the physical injuries. Memory loss, personality changes, cognitive difficulties. We won't know the full extent until he wakes up. "If he wakes up," Natalie whispered, voicing the fear that haunted her every moment. "When?" Dr. Evans corrected gently. "His brain activity is increasing. I believe he'll wake up soon, but I want you to be prepared for any outcome." That night, Natalie sat alone with Lucas, holding his hand between both of hers. The city lights twinkled beyond the window, life continuing normally for everyone else while hers remained suspended in this sterile room. "Remember our first date?" she said softly. "You took me to that tiny Japanese restaurant in North Beach, the one with the incredible sake and the chef who made us special rolls because you'd invested in his brother's business. You told me about your vision for technology that would help people with disabilities communicate more effectively. That's when I knew you were different from anyone I'd ever met." She paused, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I need you to fight Lucas. I need you to come back to me. We still have so much life to live together. Remember Japan? We're supposed to see the cherry blossoms next spring. Please don't take that dream away from us." On the 41st day, Natalie was sketching design ideas, keeping her hands busy while her heart remained in limbo, when she felt Lucas's fingers twitch in hers. She looked up at his face, hardly daring to breathe, and saw his eyelids flutter. "Lucas," she whispered, setting the sketchbook aside and leaning closer. "Baby, can you hear me?" His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually clearing as they adjusted to the light. Natalie felt tears streaming down her face as she pressed the call button for the nurse while keeping her gaze locked on his face. "You're awake," she sobbed, reaching up to touch his cheek gently. "Thank God you're awake." Lucas blinked several times, his brow furrowing as he looked around the hospital room. When his eyes finally settled on Natalie, she saw confusion there instead of recognition. Her stomach dropped. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice rough from weeks of disuse. "You're in the hospital," she explained, trying to keep her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "You were in a car accident 6 weeks ago, but you're going to be okay now. Everything's going to be okay." Dr. Evans rushed in with 2 nurses, immediately beginning his examination while Natalie stepped back, giving them space but never taking her eyes off Lucas. She watched as they checked his responses, asked him questions, shined lights in his eyes. Through it all, Lucas looked lost, like a child waking up in an unfamiliar place. When the initial examination was complete, Dr. Evans turned to Lucas with an expression that made Natalie's blood run cold. "Mr. Hawthorne, do you know who this woman is?" he asked gently, gesturing toward Natalie. Lucas looked at her again, studying her face intently. Natalie held her breath, willing him to remember, to recognize her, to say her name with the affection she had heard every day for 6 years. "No," Lucas said finally, his voice apologetic. "I'm sorry. Should I know you?" The words struck Natalie like physical blows. She felt Tessa's arms catch her as her knees buckled. She heard Dr. Evans explaining retrograde amnesia, heard Lucas asking questions about what happened to him. But all she could focus on was the way he looked at her, like she was a complete stranger. The man she loved. The man she had built a life with. The man who knew every freckle on her skin and every dream in her heart. Didn't remember her at all. Stranger in their home 3 weeks after waking, Lucas was discharged from the hospital. Natalie brought him to the Victorian home they'd lovingly restored together, a showcase of their shared aesthetic that had been featured in design magazines. Lucas walked through each room like a museum visitor, examining photographs and artifacts of a life he couldn't remember living. "This is impressive," he said, pausing at their wedding photo, a candid shot of them laughing during their first dance. "We were happy," Natalie said softly. "We look it," Lucas replied with the polite interest of a stranger viewing someone else's memories. That night, Lucas insisted on staying in the guest room. "It doesn't feel right," he explained gently. "Sharing a bed with someone who feels like a stranger to me, even if legally we're married." Natalie understood his reasoning, but it didn't make the empty space beside her any less painful. In the morning, she found him struggling with the espresso machine they'd bought in Italy. "Here," she offered, demonstrating its use while maintaining careful distance. "Thank you," Lucas said with the formal gratitude of a houseguest. "You've been incredibly patient with all this." What he meant was, with him. With the shell of the man she married who now occupied her home, wearing her husband's face but carrying none of his memories.